If you ate today, thank a farmer. And I think if you don't understand the cost of these machines that are behind you here, these tractors, the cost to operate farms, you can't keep whittling away at their profit margins. You're just going to put them out of business, and we all depend on them. If there's no farm, there's no economy. So that's what I have to say for the people who live in the big cities that don't understand or don't own property, don't understand what this is all about. It's about small rural business, rural communities, the way we've lived for years, our church socials, our community halls, all of that is being threatened.
We need help. If we're going to be over-regulated, the government has to come forward with some money. They need money to help us upgrade our water systems, nutrient management, small abattoirs. And it just can't be done. If they're going to bring all these new regulations in, farming cannot pay for all that regulation. We cannot pay for it.
We're in depression prices as far as the cattle are going, but unfortunately nothing else is in depression prices. You know, the cost of fuel goes up, the cost of hydro goes up, everything else that crosses the desk as far as bills have probably gone up in the last year, or at least have stayed the same, certainly have not gone down, but yet your income has been reduced to basically zero.
We run about 300-400 acres. I have 150 head of cattle, haven't sold any for 2 years. And I'm tired. And I'm 73 years old, my husband's 82, and we have no help.
There's beef that's still being imported into Canada, where yet Canadian producers aren't being looked after first, where that's where I think the priority needs to be, is to look after your own country and your own people first. And that's, I think, where the government has gone astray right now.
The Ministry of Environment figures sawdust is a danger to us, and we have to close up sawmills because of sawdust and bark piles. Well, in Lanark, we've told them we're not going to let them close down anymore. In the last year, they've closed down 8 small family sawmills, thrown about 100 people out of work, and we've said we're not going to let them close down any more mills in Lanark and Renfrew. And the MOE is going to get the message clearly.
The fight we're involved in now is a lot more than just sawdust, nutrient management, and chlorinated water. It's about having the freedom to make a living off your property, having the freedom to enjoy your property and the fruits of your labor, and not have to worry about our government arriving and putting you out of business. It's not every day that you can join an organization that is dedicated to a cause and has leaders that have the foresight to realize we must stick together as a large amalgamated group. All for one and one for all. People, we want true justice and freedom and a whole lot less government control. Long live the Lanark landowners and other likewise groups. Thank you.
My story does not begin here. It begins years earlier. My ancestors, the McCaffreys, Healys, Blacks, and Keys, left Ireland around 1845 during the potato famine. They came to Canada to begin a new life, one that offered hope for a bright new future. It was a struggle for them to survive, but they did. They cleared the land and built their barns and houses with the logs off their property. They dug wells for their water and milked their cows. As well, they raised chickens, pigs, sheep, and cattle. They grew their own food from their garden and milled the wheat for flour to make bread. Every spring, summer, and fall, they plowed, planted, and harvested their crops. Farming evolved over the years, and each generation enjoyed the benefits of more modern machinery. My siblings and I are the 6th generation to live on this property. My dad, who was raised on his parents' dairy farm, married my mom, a girl from the city. He brought her out to his grandparents' century-old farmhouse to begin their married life. His love for the land and his desire to continue farming was the only reason that I grew up on a beef farm. There was always work to be done on our farm, and we were expected to contribute in whatever way we could. After the work was done, we always found time for fun. We spent many hours exploring trails throughout our bush lot and building forts, rafts, and houses for our pets, as well as skating on our pond, making slides, and snowmobiling around the fields. There was no shortage of machines to drive around in. As a farm family, our time is very devoted to feeding and caring for our animals, and the many related jobs that are a part of farm life. Helping our dad build or fix fences, load wood, unload hay, work in the garden, or help fix broken machinery were all part of our chores. In the summer, many of our hot days were spent cultivating the fields, building loads of hay, and drawing in corn wagons.
Big dreams of little kids from the sticks.
Although there was lots of work to be done, I wouldn't have traded my lifestyle for any other. However, it wasn't until I was older before I truly appreciated how lucky I was to live in the country. I spent 4 years living in downtown Kingston, studying film at Queen's University. Although it was a great experience, I feel it gave me a balance and a better understanding of the two different ways of life. On May 20th, 2003, I was out on the town celebrating my 21st birthday, unaware that the Canadian agricultural industry was crashing down, reeling from the news that BSE had been found in an Alberta cow, and that the borders to the United States were closed to our cattle and sheep. I had no idea that night that this news would create a string of events that I would soon be caught up in. Upon graduation, I decided for two good reasons to come home. I missed the farm, and I had no money. I knew that the borders to the States had been closed, but I didn't see firsthand the impact of this until I was back, living in the farm community. I was intrigued by the individual stories that I was hearing from my friends and neighbors, but I still wasn't sure how it impacted me or my family. I found out soon enough. By chance one day I was sick and stayed home from my summer job. My dad said he was going to a farm auction with my brother Jesse. A farmer had gone bankrupt. His whole income was based solely on the export of dairy cattle to the United States. I felt compelled to go with them, and being a film studies graduate, I picked up my video camera to record this event. It wasn't until I saw the images through the lens of my camera that I truly realized the scope of this crisis, and how it was hitting home closer than I wanted. Items that the farmer had gathered over a lifetime were gone with the wave of a hand or a nod of a head. It was obvious to me by the strained faces of the people in the crowd that rural Ontario was hurting. Many seemed to fear that they could be next. It was this event that sparked my interest and eventually my decision to make this documentary. I started poring over the scrapbooks full of articles that my parents had been saving for the past 2 years. I soon realized that it wasn't just the farming industry that was in trouble. All sorts of small rural businesses seemed to be fighting a growing battle with their governments at all 3 levels. I read stories of good, hard-working, honest citizens being devastated by visits from their government officials. The Ministry of Environment, The Ministry of Natural Resources, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and local health units seemed to be attacking the safe and accepted practices that had been used by these businesses for years. I read about sawmills being shut down because of sawdust and campgrounds having their previously safe water testing system questioned. Farmers selling their produce at their local farmers markets were harassed by health inspectors. The list went on and on. I was shocked. There were so many rural issues and concerns that I knew I could not possibly give each topic the justice it deserved. The feelings expressed in this film are mine and my family's. Over the last year and a half of making this documentary, I've had my low points and my high points as I questioned whether it would be of any help. The issues seemed so big and so many that I wondered if they could be fixed. As the story grew, it became obvious that one person can make a difference, and a lot of people can make an even bigger difference. A lot of the demonstrations, food strikes, and tractor rallies have been organized by the Landowners Association, or the LLA, a group that was started around a kitchen table by 4 friends. Injustices against honest rural citizens was happening too frequently, and laws were being passed and implemented that did not seem to address real problems or use common sense. Randy Hillier, an electrician by trade and rural resident, was disgusted by the treatment his friends were receiving at the hands of their local government officials. Brian Hanna, John Vanderspank, and Merle Bowes made up the remaining founding members. A vote was taken and Randy was declared the president of the LLA. This group started off small but with conviction. When they said they were going to do something, they did it. It wasn't long before politicians, bureaucrats, and the media recognized and acknowledged the existence of this growing group. The rural revolution of 2003 was fully on its way.
Let them try. Let them try. But the thing is, they want to put all of us in jail? I'd like to see them try.
Where's this passion coming from?
Over the next few hours, I will be taking you behind the scenes and behind the headlines of the LLA and introduce you to the people that they are fighting for.
The farm was started, it's the third generation I am, and my son would be the fourth. We used to milk dairy cows. We were milking dairy since 1966 to 1998 is when we retired from the milk business. And at that time we started raising Holstein heifers for replacements and selling to the States and to Mexico. We were between 11 and 1200 when BSE started. And it's been kind of downhill ever since. We haven't bought any more since, but we've just been trying to sell. Maybe 1% of all our sales was just local, that was all. We would have 450 acres of corn silage, another 400 or 500 acres of hay to do. So yes, you didn't have the milking, but you were still busy.
Prior to BSC, we were doing, about $1 million a year of sales, and then all of a sudden when your market shut off to the States and Mexico, there is no income. And I've actually had checks cross our desk for $2.01 for you send an animal to the sale barn, and you get $2.01. That doesn't even take the 2 of us to Tim Hortons for 2 cups of coffee.
Well, you just go to your store. If you buy a steak, what is it, $6 or $7, $8 a steak? You can buy the whole cow.
You can see if your income is basically nil, the bills keep coming in. We're in depression prices as far as the cattle are going, but unfortunately nothing else is in depression prices. The cost of fuel goes up, the cost of hydro goes up, everything else that crosses the desk as far as bills have probably gone up in the last year, or at least have stayed the same, certainly have not gone down, but yet your income has been reduced to basically zero. So needless to say, once you get into your 16th month of this, you have to decide what you're going to do, and I guess that's why we decided we had to, have this sale and change direction.
2 cents a pound, 2 cents a pound. Sent this farm 6 feet underground.
There's a lot of things farmers, are having to look at and say, gosh, is it
All worth it.
Is it worth it? What am I going to get in the end you know, what am I going to have to retire on when, you know, I have to put all this money out and I'm not really getting at this point in time anything back in.
'Cause who can live on just 2 cents a pound? Chris Moore from Kinburn, Ontario works his family farm as well as part-time at a local tractor dealership, which is also another victim of these troubled times. He has been a friend of mine since I was 8 years old, and I wanted to see how he was coping through this difficult period.
Last year my corn, a third of the check I got went to drying with the higher fuel prices. I don't think there's much of a future in cash crops either. Your return keeps going down while your inputs keep going up. And your profit margin keeps getting smaller and smaller. And in corn, it's already gone to the other side where you're losing money. A lot of guys that grew a lot of corn can't afford to put in a crop this year. They didn't make enough on their corn to pay for seed. Probably a quarter of my paycheck from my off-farm job goes to keeping the farm. And everything from the farm goes right back in just to keep the bills paid. We're beef, cash crop with sheep, and probably moving more towards sheep and less cash crop and beef just due to prices and economics. I think the beef industry in Canada, if we don't get more packing plants and more markets, will disappear. Honestly, over the next few years, the consumer won't have the choice to love Canadian beef anymore. That'll be supplied by boxed meat probably from Argentina, Brazil, Peru, which aren't so strict on health regulations. Most guys I know don't want handouts. It's there and you really have to apply for it, because if you don't have any money. So you apply for it, but we don't want that. We want markets for our animals, and it's wasting taxpayers' money to give us handouts. You're farther ahead to hire lawyers to go to the World Trade Organization for us. You're farther ahead to send trade delegations to markets that maybe we could have. That's money better spent. US, very heavily subsidized. European Union, very heavily subsidized. And the rest of the country stand up for their farmers, where ours won't subsidize us, which is to me a good thing. But unfortunately, they won't stand up for us on the world trade.
The Simpsons, an Ottawa farm family, are my neighbors, and I have known them since I was a young child. Several generations in this family help out with the dairy operation. Bill Simpson, his wife Helen, their 2 sons Gary and Kevin and their wives, plus several grandchildren, work together to get the milking done. Trudy enjoys the farming way of life and wishes to continue it. Her brother Kyle has many interests and isn't sure if dairy farming is one of them.
Do you want to still farm?
No money in it. You're always stuck here 24/7. You're losing money, you're not making it. Like call cows, instead of getting money for them, you just have to ship them, you get nothing. There we got like $7 for 3 of them the other day.
$7 for 3 cows? Call cows?
Yeah. We sent them away. So I mean, there's no money, it's cheaper to just sort of get rid of it.
In terms of all the different regulations and bylaws that are hitting the farmers, could you give us one example of one that has impacted your farm?
Biggest one that's going to affect us is our place has a lot of drainage ditches, and they wanted to keep back 50 feet with fertilizer and manure and everything. So I mean, there's 50 feet on every field. What's it going to grow if you don't fertilize it?
So before that, you could go farther along.
Well, we keep in. We don't pollute the water, but we spread to the edge of the field always.
Right.
And the same with the fertilizer. We put it to the edge of the fields. But our fields are all tiled. I'm just glad we've done as much as we have. Like we have a concrete manure pit. I don't know if you've seen it out there, round. And when the nutrient management comes along, you're pretty nearly going to have to put in a cement pit.
At your own cost.
Well, they say there's going to be money, but there's no federal money yet. I bet you we're out a little over 100,000. I read a piece in the paper and a guy went ahead and done it, and now we can't get any money. Once it's done, they won't pay you. And the trouble, if you do it the way they want it, they got to bring an engineer on site, and pretty nearly all your grant money is eat up in engineering fees. So you're almost doing it yourself.
Exactly.
And ours, the engineer told us we'd need about 110 foot pit. So we went to 150 feet, and it's just big enough. We have about 9 months storage, and it's I think it works out to about 0.7 cents a gallon. You know, so it's not too expensive. It costs us 10 or 11,000 a year to empty the pit. But then for what we'd have tied up in machinery, plus your time, it's not too bad a deal. I record the date we sprayed fields, what we sprayed them with, the wind direction, if it was a hot day or a sunny day, or I keep all them records anyway. And they're going to want you to keep that in your nutrient management, but it's all the way they're doing it. You can't do that yourself.
Well, so they want you to hire an engineer to do that for you. The paperwork, you mean?
Yeah, the paperwork. You've got to be computer literate for one thing, and I'm not. That's the one thing. They say it's a 2-day course to get certified, and the 1 day is nothing but computers, and that's out of my scope.
It's amusing how Minister of Environment, goes after farmers. How many sheep I can have in a square kilometer, and what days I can spread the manure on, and how many days storage I should have. When St. Catharines, Niagara, Toronto, Ottawa, Windsor, Sarnia, these cities are the biggest polluters in Ontario, probably Canada. Biggest polluters. They dump raw sewage, millions of liters. You see on TV the big sewage plant in Ottawa. It's about 6 swimming pools as best I can figure, and that's a couple hours raw sewage. It's not getting treated. They have dumps, bypasses. For me, my 20 cows and 40 sheep aren't making as much manure as 10 apartment buildings. Yet I'm heavier regulated. Cows can get out, it happens. Gates get left open, fences get broke down, it happens. But here, there's about 30 beavers in the creek, and I don't think anybody's regulating them. You could take them to court, but there are usually no shows for that sort of thing.
The Ministry of Environment undertook its agenda to clean up Ontario's waterways. Although studies revealed that many major cities were the large polluters of our lakes and rivers, the MOE failed to prosecute many of them. Instead, with cities bypassing the filter plants and dumping raw, untreated sewage directly into our waterways, the Ministry of Environment targeted farmers. A province-wide grade 11 chemistry textbook implicated agricultural runoff from cattle manure as the cause of the Walkerton tragedy.
The reason that Walkerton happened was not because of any of the elaborate explanations they came up with. It happened because a couple of drunk guys were putting the chlorine in the water supply.
More and more rules and regulations were being piled onto the rural community in the name of safety and health.
A good example of regulations, I can give you an example from my farm. We do some direct marketing, which we feel is a really important thing for small family farms to be able to market our own products. And we're finding fewer and fewer small abattoirs able to process our meats. If we lose those small abattoirs, we will have no way of marketing our meats. We agree with meat inspection. We feel that it's important for food safety, but we totally disagree with the over-regulation of small abattoirs.
These meat packing plants, they're not the Tysons and the Cargills. These are the small family-owned meat packing plants, and they're being killed by regulation that provides no value to anybody other than further increasing the monopoly of the big boys. We've had enough of this government closing down our meat packers, and we're not going to let them close down anymore.
This government has got to If they're going to over-regulate these small abattoirs, they've got to show them some money. They've got to give them some money to do it, or we're going to lose them all.
The packers in this country in Alberta, through the Dunn report in 2003, their profits went up 280%.
Yeah, that's not right.
And that's not right. Cargill alone, on the first beef support program, got $433 million. I got $1,260.
That ain't right either.
The government's given subsidies and grants to your big packers like Tyson and Cargill, among others. They would be paying 25 cents a pound for the beef and flipping it for $3.75. It's a free country, I can understand that. If I was in their shoes, I'd probably be doing the exact same. And they shouldn't be penalized for that. Who should be penalized is the government for giving taxpayers money to these guys. That's not good business. Hey, but it's the opposite of Robin Hood.
And we have to nurture these abattoirs that are encouraging people to buy from a farmer. And yet we're going the other way, we're getting rid of them. And we've gone from about 350 of them 10 or 15 years ago down to less than 200 now, and we're going to lose a lot more right away. We've got consumers everywhere in Ontario who want to buy direct from a farmer, and we've got no mechanism for them to do it.
The landowners, we're paying our farmers twice as much for their beef that you're buying here today than what they've been getting from the multinationals who are selling that same beef for $12 and $13 a pound. Earlier this year, the government came out with a compensation package for beef farmers. Near 85% of it went to 2 big meat packing plants. People who have made about an additional 300% profit over this BSE problem. So the people making the biggest profits have also gotten the lion's share of the compensation package. So today you can see what you're doing. You're supporting local farmers, providing them some value for their product, and getting a deal yourself. We're tired of having farmers getting screwed and consumers getting gouged by this government, and we're not going to take it any longer. As you're in the lineup, you'll see a Lanark Graves cemetery right beside our order form. You'll see on it the tombstones of family farms and sawmills and abattoirs and a host of others. That's what's happening due to over-regulation in the rural areas.
My friend Mike Wheeler came to help me film the Perth rally. Soon after he got there, we were approached by a woman who wanted to show us her truck.
They can see it. This is a block to block when you have your wagons loaded. Rope, which I lassoed a cow with yesterday. Baler twine for the baler. This is for wounds on the animals. Air for the tractor tires.
Sarah explained how you always have to be prepared for the unexpected when you are a farmer. She definitely was prepared.
We have to keep our tractors in shape with oil as well. Now that's just a little bit of it. We also, I do anyway, keep a roll of toilet paper because you never know when you're in the fields when you have to go to the bathroom. And I think maybe what we really need is a butterfly net to get the government and tell them we need some help. And we run about 300-400 acres. I have 150 head of cattle. Haven't sold any for 2 years. And I'm tired. And I'm 73 years old. My husband's 82. And we have no help. And our taxes are behind. And the government charges us 15% on back taxes, which we don't have to pay. We don't have money to pay it. So there you have it. And it's a sad, sad situation. And we work early morning to night, drop in bed. Barely have time to cook our meals or energy left to do it.
Ladies and gentlemen, although these proceedings are metaphoric and figurative, this is a very serious situation. I have been sent here by Prime Minister Paul Martin and Premier Dalton McGuinty to put an end to the illegal acts that are taking place in this farmers' market. as well as to abuse and oppress the rebellious citizens of Lanark County. Everyone who is here today, whether you are buying or selling illegal farm produce, is in violation of the law, which has been created by politicians and bureaucrats who are much, much more intelligent than you are. By order of the government, I am forced to send armed bureaucrats into the crowd to arrest the suppliers of LLA expected beef, ungraded vegetables, and eggs, and unpasteurized apple cider. This is shameful.
I am the nameless bureaucrat. For the safety and protection of my job, I ask that you issue a warrant for the arrest of Jack McLaren on the grounds that he sold unpasteurized apple cider at this location.
If Mr. McLaren attempts to resist, use whatever force is necessary. Just get him up here.
The reason you pasteurize cider is because the people pick their apples off the ground and there could be animal feces on the ground. We pick ours off the trees where there is no animal feces because there's no giraffes in our area. We also have a clean place where we make it. Along comes government inspectors, bureaucrats. They tell me I have to pasteurize it. I said to him, so what you're telling me is it's all right to feed your customers animal feces if you boil it first.
Come gather around me and pay good attention. A story I'll tell you in rhyme of the beautiful land that I'm honored to mention, this Ottawa Valley of mine. From the lake of Two Mountains to Mattawa town, Smith Falls to the Gatineau line. It's a land of great size and a sports paradise in this Ottawa Valley of mine. Now the people that live here, they don't quarrel or quibble, they work hard but like a good time. It's the home of step dancing, the good old time fiddle, this Ottawa Valley of mine. From the hills of Deep River to Buckingham's Mills, from Shawville to Perth on the Tay. For music and mirth, there's no place here on earth like the Ottawa Valley, they say.
Good morning and welcome to the Lanark Landowners Rural Revolution and here's our beef food strike. We also have some people going around with our LLA boot. It's a donation boot to help pay for things like the sound system, the band that will be here to play shortly, and all the efforts and costs to put these food strikes on. And that boot is for kicking government's butt.
It's about damn time that the farmer rose up and took matters into their own hands. Canada's only going to be happy when everyone is a consumer or working for a big company.
Exactly. Right? That's exactly the way it's going.
To bring all our beef in from Brazil, bring all of our lamb in from New Zealand,
Australia, yep.
Then why should we have any farms at all?
And what happens when they don't want to ship to us anymore and they say, sorry, we need our meat?
No, what happens when they decide they're going to ship to us but at higher prices? Or they don't have the same environmental regulations and we get tainted meat from them. You don't control that food supply whatsoever when it's inside another country. Right, hon?
Get him started and he don't stop.
We do not have food sustainability in this country anymore, and without that we don't control our country. I don't think a lot of people realize that there's only 3 to 4 days worth of food in any major city or rural municipality in Ontario. And for whatever reason, through climatic change, and or political or terrorism. If our border closes with the U.S., 85% of our food comes up that way, and we're in trouble. People will starve to death. And I don't think people understand that.
It's not right what's going on. It really isn't. The people have to support the farmers because we need the farmers.
You do feel that way?
Oh, yeah. 100%.
So it's important to you that Canada feeds Canadians.
That's right.
In general.
Yeah. You need the farmers. It's gone down too far already. I mean, we've lost too many farmers already. We don't want to lose any more.
And the city folk do support the farmers. They're not vocal about it. They do. They do. We're from the city and they do support the farmers.
I think it's the minority that's giving more trouble than anything else. I think it's the minority people, not the majority.
We can pre-order but not here today, so I guess we're allowed to get 15 pounds here today if we can make it all the way back to this line. But I'm going to wait. It's a fabulous price and it's local. And that's really, for me, what matters is local.
If our land is that important for the public good to have control over it, that's fine and dandy with us. But you're going to buy it from us just like we bought it from the guy before us. That's called fairness. If they don't buy it, that's called stealing. And we don't like governments to steal from us, just like we don't like anybody to steal from us. And we won't accept it. And that's what that sign says. It says, this land is our land, and back off government. You've gone too far these days.
My name is Mike Milankovich. This is my wife Sylvia. We travel here from Timmins, Ontario because we heard from our good friends that this was going on. And we believe very strongly that the farmers in Lanark County should step up the action even more than they have. How's that? Excellent. And it's unfair to the farmers. They put their blood and sweat and tears into it and they get nothing back for it. So this is the kind of thing that should happen throughout Ontario, if not throughout the country. There are too many middlemen raking off the profits. The farmers get nothing for the sweat they put into the work that they do. So that's the way we feel. What do you say there?
I say that it's time that the farmers have this opportunity because people don't realize they can't eat unless the farmers make a profit, and they need money for their gas, for their tractors, they need money to pay for hired help, they need money for buildings.
We keep importing our food and paying more and more, and the huge agribusinesses are they're the ones that profit. So I think it's unfair, and I think this is the sort of thing we have to continue doing throughout the country.
Some of these guys have forgotten that in a democracy, it's people who tell governments what to do, not the other way around. And that's what we're doing here today, is we're telling governments that we want to buy fresh food, and they're not going to stop us, and they should be doing everything to protect us, not put us out of business. If you could be generous, be kind, and later on this afternoon, you'll be enjoying the best beef you've ever had. We got here by 6 a.m. Every door to these two buildings were blocked with tractors and bales of hay.
We had closed up both the OMAF and the M&R buildings here in Kemptville. About 6:30, the police pulled in force. There was a half a dozen cruisers with a couple, 2 to 3 men in each cruiser.
About a half hour later, we had about 5 cruisers show up. Told us that we were breaking the law, not letting people into these buildings today.
Randy Hillier went over to talk to the several police officers that were on scene. And at that time, as he approached them, they approached him as well and backed him into a corner.
They wanted to arrest us.
The police came up and were very aggressive.
I saw what was going on, so I gave a shout to the other members to come. And
lots of threats of different charges and stuff. We didn't back down. We locked arms.
The police did let us know that there were enough cells for us to be detained.
They threatened us to physically move us and bring in more police.
So when enough of our members got on scene, the police seemed to back down a bit.
They saw a reason and started to back off, and by about 7:30, they only had about 3 cruisers left.
We were pretty close to being arrested this morning.
In fact, they read the full Miranda rights and everything to us this morning, and that's the first. It was within seconds, I thought, of being arrested. Yeah.
Mr. Hillier around?
If you put 2 cruisers right there.
Sure, that was the original plan. We're just going to put 1 cruiser right there. Things didn't go smoothly this morning, did they? We're here, hopefully we can have a peaceful, positive protest in here. You guys can get some good media coverage and get your point across. And hopefully someone listens to it.
That's the whole idea.
The important people listen to it.
The important people are all here. Have a lovely day.
Oh, we will. We'll try to entertain you.
These guys who work here and collect money from us every week with their wages, when they decide to go on strike, they can close up those buildings anytime they want. And again, the public can't get into them. Well, they didn't like getting a little taste of their own medicine this morning. Thought they could intimidate us and arrest us and get us out of here. They got a little lesson at the Kemptville College in democracy and what people do when they keep getting screwed by our government.
Russ Hillier, Randy's son, helped me interview several people at the Kemptville rally.
So my name is Russ Hillier. I just want to ask you a couple questions today. What brings you out to the LLA event?
Well, we heard about the economically priced beef, so we came out to get our supply, so to speak.
Well, I want to help the farmers out because I think the stores are ripping everybody off with the prices of meat now.
You feel the farmers need a lot of support in these times?
Yep, you'll never get it from the Liberals.
We're here because we want fresh fruit, not organized by the government and not controlled.
Now, do you think these demonstrations accomplish anything?
Well, it builds awareness.
I think it's all going through a vacuum.
Yeah, I think it does. There's always a bunch of people together can make more noise than one person by themselves, and you need an organized movement.
It should have been done right away. I mean, how long has this been going on?
So do you think the problems afflicting rural Ontario are going to change anytime soon?
They're not going to change if people don't force a change. You know, they're moving in a certain direction with this increasing legislation, and it's going to get stickier and stickier as you go along unless people stand up and say, whoa, that's enough. Only a lot of people are going to have to stand up and say it. They're going to have to keep saying it until somebody listens.
Do you think the Americans are ever going to open up the border?
Well, I think Canada should start testing their beef. What's the big deal? It's maybe $20. You add on another $20. At least they'll be able to sell their beef to Japan. And that opens up another industry where they can hire people to do these testing. So everybody's going to profit in the long run. Farmers are going to sell their beef, and there's going to be more jobs. But of course, this is a Liberal government. They only put jobs to their own people.
People need to talk to the right people. It doesn't do any good if you sit around and gripe to each other. You've got to make yourself visible at things like this. You've got to read the information. You've got to join if there is an organized group so you can talk together. You need to write to your provincial ministers. You need to write to your federal ministers. You need to write to your local guys, whoever they are. You need to send the emails. You need to write the letters. You need to make the phone call. You need to come to things like this and stand here and be heard.
I think a lot of people don't realize if it wasn't for the farmer, they wouldn't have any food. And part of the problem is because so many people have never lived in a rural area, and most people now live in the cities. So when it comes down to it, all they think about is milk coming out of the bag. They have no concept of what it took to get that milk into the bag. Scary.
We've also closed up the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture and Food. The people who keep coming out with these stupid regulations that prevent farmers from selling their products, prevent farmers from making a profit, and help putting farmers out of business.
We're a family farm to try and keep going. They've got to fight the elements. They never get rich. They're doing good if they break even a lot of years. And the last thing they need is a bunch of regulation that we've gotten along just fine without for the last 100 years. Why all of a sudden are these things so dangerous that we have to be protected from this stuff? And these people care about what they're doing. Their families are eating this food. They're taking care of it. They're using proper procedures. You don't see farmers that just came out of 8th grade and started farming anymore. Most of these guys have degrees. You're at an agricultural college here.
The Ministry of Agriculture and Food and the Ministry of Natural Resources, who of course think wildlife is far more important than farmers and farms, and they want us to feed the deer for them so they can sell hunting licenses and make a whole pile of money and let farmers go bankrupt feeding them. So, like I said, 2 birds with 1 stone. We closed up the Ministry of Natural Resources this morning as well.
How are we going to start there? June 19th, 2004. Father's Day, 2004. Are you filming now?
What happened on the day of this incident?
Well, we went down and met John Vandersbank. That's the farmer that owned the property. They were going out to hunt deer, and I took down 2 hunters from Renfrew, Sean and his buddy Matt, and they were out scouting around. They never seen any deer, nothing. Arguing all his crew with canine dogs. I don't know how many vehicles they had, 4, 5, 6. And they chased down Sean and his buddy and charged him for poaching and all this sort of stuff. Not a bullet was fired. Charged John Vanderspank for groundhog hunting deer illegally and out of season and all that. And he didn't even have a gun, and I got charged for hunting white-tailed deer, and I didn't have a gun at the deer hunt. So now we've got a court case coming up November 23rd, 2004. 2 months after that, that was June 19th. The game warden showed up at our farm on a Sunday. I had a cell phone in the tractor, and I just went like this, 1 minute lads, I'll be with you. And as I was loading bales slowly in and out of the barn, phoned the house, told John Van Jenner, and I said, you better start phoning the boys, because I said they're in the yard, 2 game wardens sitting right here.
So you got other LLA members to come up and help you?
Yeah. They try some scare tactics. You're going to be charged and you're going to do time, and they're on a witch hunt, these guys. So.
Feel they've overstepped their bounds?
Oh yeah. Coming in on a Sunday for one thing. So anyways, I held them up for quite a while, and I asked them more questions what they had for me, and they didn't like that. They were terrible nervous the whole time. Anybody going to show up here? We've been blocked in before. I said, no lads. I said, nobody's going to block you in. All of a sudden the posse showed up. I heard the van doors opening and shutting, and then they were pretty mad, and they just closed their books, and the game was over, and give them a little tuning, and they were on their way.
And they left after that?
And they didn't come back. Haven't yet either.
The government of the day lulled tobacco farmers into thinking that their industry was secure for several years. A rally was organized to block off the 401. Busloads of supporters traveled down to Tillsonburg to support the tobacco farmers. Large amounts of money were invested by these farmers to keep competitive by upgrading their kilns and buying more quota. All this fell apart when the Premier of Ontario instigated his aggressive campaign for a smoke-free province. Tobacco growers and businesses that had complied with regulations and built smokers' rooms were all left with no recourse. Tobacco farmers had been encouraged to comply with these new rules to upgrade their kiln systems, only to be told a few years later that their industry was in decline and their quota was going to be drastically reduced.
See, now we're in the tobacco belt. We want to put that belt around McGinty's neck and draw it a little bit tighter down here. It's not just going to be a talk with McGinty that we want. It's going to take a lot more than his word to make us believe that he's going to fix things. We're going to want some concrete, firm, public statements and commitments from him on what he's going to do, and we're going to help him decide what he's going to do.
They were not fighting smoking, but the methods used to bring them down. Some farmers told us that their quota had been reduced to 27%.
This Tuesday, Dalton put a tax on cigarettes. Works out to over 16 cents a pack. And he's put 3 of them on in the last year. That's on top of all the tax that's already on there. You know that the tobacco farmer doesn't receive 16 cents a pack from tobacco? Sounds like a pretty good get-rich scheme to me. We're not going to take it anymore. Governments, if you want to get rid of tobacco, buy us out. Simple as that. If the governments want to be a leader in tobacco control, let them be a leader in tobacco compensation to those who are displaced by their action. Globalization is going to have huge ramifications to rural Ontario and rural Canada.
I believe that the government is hurting the industry. They're buying cheaper tobacco across the world, but they're not realizing what they're hurting us tobacco farmers in this country, where they are actually situated. I started growing tobacco in 1977, and now I am growing tobacco, soybeans, azuki beans, and cucumbers and rye to subsidize what I used to make on tobacco. In 1977, I grew a crop of 26 acres. I had a profit. I grow now 75 acres, and I have 0 profit. So with the prices of chemicals and material that we have to use for our product has gone up, but our profit for the farm has gone dramatically down.
McGuinty's government takes $8 to $10 million in taxes from that 60 acres of tobacco crop. The farmer's left with peanuts, and McGuinty's lives their life O'Reilly there on $8 to $10 million of labor that those tobacco farmers are doing. And now he wants to put the nail to them with this reverse auction and put them out of business with no money for their quota, no money for their property. He wants them to be bankrupt. We're not going to let McGuinty do that.
For on tobacco, before we had open flame heat, now it's indirect heat. That means it's in a closed chamber, which costs close to about $7,000 to $8,000 per kiln. And we always have to have roughly 12 kilns to cure a crop. So that much money, we had to be forced to do it to comply with the government's regulations. So we had no choice. And now, with the downsizing of the crop, because of the taxation, that's why we're here, because we're just losing.
The tobacco farmers, they're being screwed over by this federal government and the provincial government. They're being bought out at about 20 cents on the dollar on their quota system. And this government, who should be protecting the value of quota, is taking it away from them. We'll be burning a few dollars of taxpayers' money today in the form of tobacco bales.
Some Canadian cigarettes contain a high percentage of imported tobacco from countries that have few, if any, restrictions on the chemicals used to grow and treat that tobacco. It was these facts that made us all question the real motive behind this smoke-free agenda.
Let's make sure we keep that smoke burning back there too.
So here we are today, and again we are at war, but we shouldn't have to be. The veterans from my family and from so many other families from across this great land put their lives on the line. Many didn't return, so that we could indeed live in a free and democratic society. Today, government at all levels are stripping us of our rights to live and grow and farm in our very own rural communities. In the newspaper on Monday, Ontario Ag Minister Steve Peters is asking the province's farmers for patience in response to today's blockade. He also stated he has no plans to meet with organizers of the grassroots. This tells me he has no intention of meeting with farmers to solve the problems we're all faced with. If Mr. Peters does not want to deal with me because I'm a director on a grassroots committee, Tobacco Farmers in Crisis, then today I would ask him to resign. The rural revolution has begun in this part of Ontario, and it will spread from coast to coast. On behalf of all tobacco farmers, we want to thank everyone that's come from everywhere today. We will not forget. Thank you very much.
And they didn't forget. Shortly after their rally, they joined another protest at Prescott, an hour's drive from my family, but about a 5 to 6 hour drive for them. They came to support our cause, as we had supported theirs days earlier. They drove trucks and tractors and brought in busloads of people. This was about supporting each other and standing together, even if the fight involved different issues.
And they just keep forgetting about us all the time.
Beyond the Mississippi and the Lanark Hills, some folks were having trouble with some deer in their fields. They called and wrote the and called themselves the LLA. We're fighting hard to try and keep the family farm, stop the way they designate our land. But someone's passing bylaws with a stroke of a pen that'll only bring the tractors on the highways again. We nominated Randy as the president choice. Now rural people on the land would have a good voice. Soon the group headed down to Kempville town, and with a truckload of feed they shot the M&R down. Now something must have happened when they crossed that line. Now nuisance tags were given out 10 at a time. Rules and regulations, studies and consultations, what you're doing to us is just a crime. Government officials knocking at our door, can't you read our back off signs? Well, the people in the city had heard the debate. No unexpected food from the farmer's gate. So they drove through the country past the police blockades, past the long line of cars and the tractor parades. Yeah, they all stood together, they lined up to wait to buy their meat pies and eggs from the farmer's gate. Yeah, farmers are fighting, so you will still find Canadian food on your plates. Will anyone care when they are all gone and you get all your food from the States? Well, the LLA momentum, yeah, it won't stand still. From Tilsonburg and Prescott up to Curry Hill, the farmers and their tractors leave along the road. The burden of their troubles is a heavy load. But now we stand together in united display, a group of rural residents, the LLA. And now we stand together in united display, a group of rural residents, the LLA.
Yesterday I had the very great privilege of tabling a motion in the House of Commons, as Gord said, demanding that the Liberal government do two things. Number one, immediately remove the cash deposit requirement. The second thing we're calling upon them to do is to honor the commitments to the farmers that they've already made. Now, whether those commitments are to case payments, whether they're for our tobacco farmers, whether they're for the fed cattle set-aside programs, let's get the cash to the farm gate. So I share your frustration, and to see so many people coming together in an orderly manner for such a good cause just does my heart a world of good, and I'm glad to be here to be able to share it with you today. Thank you very much. Let's make our voices heard, and my colleagues and I in the Conservative Caucus, we will be, and we will continue to be, the farmer's voice in Ottawa.
You people are the people who produce the wealth that supports this province, that supports this country. Unfortunately, we have a government in Ontario right now which is laden with bureaucrats. I don't know what your taxes have been like over the last couple of years. Mine have gone up considerably. All I've seen for my rise in taxes is an increase in bureaucrats. And those bureaucrats have to justify their place at the table. So what do? They create regulations and rules to impact you. They're taking your wealth and wasting it. Queen's Park should take note that it's not only people from Eastern Ontario here today, but we have people from Southern Ontario, Southwestern Ontario, tobacco growers from Tilsonburg area. What it means is the agricultural and rural communities of this entire province are fed up with Dalton McGuinty. And again, it's great to see the solidarity of people from all over the province coming here today to show the provincial government that it's time for them to back off and let us get on with our lives, enjoying our land, doing our business the way we've done it. In this country, they always talk about multiculturalism. Well, we are one of the multis in culture. Why are we the one that's being ignored and being stepped on? I think it's wrong. I think we have to show the province that we're not going to let it happen anymore. Toby Barrett, it's yours.
As a provincial member of Parliament, as was mentioned, a lot of my farmers are tobacco farmers, beef farmers, and corn farmers. We know where corn and soybean prices are right now, and we can't sell our beef. And Dalton McGuinty has declared war on tobacco, and we really appreciate the understanding that we're getting from people like yourselves in Eastern Ontario. Randy Hillier and some of the usual suspects showed up down our way, and you've given us some hope. We thought we were on our own down in the rural south. So a heartfelt thank you to the Landowner Association.
We're trying to encourage politicians in government to represent our interests. And our farm organizations have to realize that you can fight today for a little bit more money, but that doesn't solve the problem. You'll just be back tomorrow to fight for a little bit more. And it's an ongoing fight every year. Because they're not fixing the problem. Then they have to start fixing the problem.
Dusty old farmer's out working his field, leaning down over his tractor wheel. When a government man comes onto his land saying, I got you a brand new deal. I'm hearing some things on my radio, like they're gonna start metering our wells. Well, this is my way to say I ain't gonna pay. It's my water, just go to hell. Straw hats and government bandits mocking land rights like they do. I ain't at ease with bureaucracies. Here's a word from the farmers to you. Straw hats and government bandits mocking land rights like they do. Well, this is our land, we'll take a stand. Here's a warning from the farmers to you. Combines gang up, take most of our bread. Things just ain't like they used to be. Canadian kids after American dreams, leaving the farm for the big factories. If the government thinks that it's helping out down at the old family farm, well, they need to look at our fields and our brooks, 'cause they ain't doing nothing but harm. Straw hats and government bandits mocking land rights like they do. Well, I ain't at ease with bureaucracies. Here's a word from the farmers to you. Straw hats and government bandits mocking land rights like they do. Well, this is our land, we'll take a stand. Here's a warning from the farmers to you.
My name is Leo Imfeld. I'm a dairy farmer and I got a bit of cash crop. I came from Switzerland.
Can you tell us the reason why you're here today?
I think everything explains what I got on the tractor and on the wagon. I got a big check from one cow, 1,366 pounds, and I got 52 cents, and the trucking was not even paid with it. The cow will give about 400 pounds of ground meat. If you put that in 1/4 pound hamburger, gives you 1,600 hamburgers. And if you buy them at McDonald's or any fast food chain, it's about $1.70. It gives $2,720 for that cow. But surely it's not the farmer that makes it. I think we have to change our government a lot, especially all the regulations that are coming up. And the ones that are already in place, we have to fix them.
You think this LLA people know what we're up to in this thing? Do you think that we're getting support from people or not?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes. More and more. Yes.
And what about the OFA? Are they supporting this down here?
I'm still an OFA member, but I don't believe too much in them.
A little disappointed, eh?
Yes. I got much more effort into LLA.
We have a son, but he hasn't decided yet whether he wants to take over under the conditions that now exist. I don't like so many government rules, regulations, legislation coming down the tube, Clean Water Act, nutrient management, the oceans and fisheries. I don't like them having the ability to come on my property at will and tell me how to do any drainage. I figure I know how to do that without their input. The farm has been around since 1867 and it's still going without so much government interference, so I don't see why it shouldn't keep going for a few more generations.
You're here because, like the rest of us, you realize that rural Ontario's in trouble, and the purpose of this gathering is to send one more message to Queen's Park that not only are we not going away, but our ranks are growing and we're getting more determined than ever. So you can all give yourselves a pat in the back for being here today, and I can guarantee you one thing, that we all stick together like this, Queen's Park's going to have to listen. They won't have any choice.
Canadians have to get behind us, and you can see here we have 3, maybe 4 landowners associations together here, with the Glengarry Association, with Leeds and Grenville Landowner Association, and the Lanark Landowner Association tying here, and we are geographically not close. It's an hour and a half for us to be here, and the guys from Lanark, I'm sure it's a over 2-hour drive for them to come down. So I think as this issues are brought to the forefront, more landowners associations will be formed and more people will get involved, and this is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. At least we're getting good press coverage. I think it's making people aware that there are issues out here that are affecting the ability of farmers to continue to farm, and all of the rural landowners, not just farmers in Ontario. And I think Dalton McGuinty has to get the message.
And I'm sure everybody inside the building would like to say welcome down to Queen's Park here today. Such a good thing to see so many people out here.
Stacy's here.
Hi, it's cool. Nice to meet you.
Okay, some important announcements for everybody. We've just been in one of them bureaucratic workshops, and we seem to get a few things done this time around for a change. Our tractors are on the 401. All that fear-mongering and innuendo and scuttlebutt of mass arrests and terrible, terrible things happening is untrue. We've been working a lot with the OPP and the Metro Police. The Metro Police will be closing all of University Avenue shortly once the tractors come down. And I have to thank them for working with us, providing the escorts for our tractors on the 401 as well as through downtown Toronto. Out of business. Your job is to protect our property, protect our freedom, and do the right thing, McGuinty. No more destroying Ontario farmers. When McGuinty was in opposition, I think you're causing me feedback there, buddy. Wish we could get some feedback from this government. Anyway, there's an ethanol plant that's been on the books. Farmers have bought shares in, and they've owned those shares for 13 years. And for 13 years, we haven't been able to get it built. Now it's being held up on one more environmental assessment. For 13 years, those farmers have lost a market to sell their corn to. For 13 years, rural Ontario has lost the jobs that ethanol plant should be providing. For 13 years, this government has done nothing except cause the problems, create the obstacles, and keep rural Ontario poor. Today, a little bit later, we're going to be taking 11 resolutions into Queen's Park. It's the repeal of a number of legislations, also the creation of a couple new ones to protect the ownership of our property, and to return the money that's been stolen from rural Ontario, take that back from the people who have stolen it, return it to us, and then create the legislation so they can never steal it again. That's what's going to happen today.
All farmers have to stick together because this government wants to separate us and take us down.
Well, it's good to see everybody out participating today. Let's show the people of Ontario that we're working together in a civil manner. We need to send government a united message today. Farmers need to be heard. Farmers need to be heard with one loud, strong, united voice.
The LLA have fulfilled a need and a vacancy here in rural Ontario. A need and a vacancy that my organization and I, the National Farmers Union, have not met. And I'm not placing any blame for that on the Corps of Volunteers. But it is vital for a person, or an organization, or a government to be able to admit mistakes or shortcomings and move to correct them. And with all the things that we did get done, it's obvious there were many we didn't get done, and all you folks here today are testament to that.
I guess we're here tonight to talk about the crisis that is in agriculture. And it's a crisis that is getting greater every day. And quite honestly, I don't know how to handle it anymore. A lot of the executive and board members on the Federation of Agriculture don't know how to handle it anymore. And one of the big problems in Ontario is that we have too many organizations. And sooner or later, when the crisis gets big enough, we will come together and we will speak with one voice. And when that happens, we just may then be able to be more successful with the government.
We're hearing a lot about how farmers need one voice, and we hear that over and over again lately from the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, and well, they have been our one voice for quite a few years. The National Farmers Union is saying what we need really is one message with many voices, and that's why we believe that National Farmers Union, LLA, OFA, they've all got to bring their message for farmers. But to have one voice, I think the government can look at one voice, and it's very easy to control one voice. We need many voices with one message.
We do have some wins. Thanks to Randy Hilliard and the Atlantic Landowners Association, they're waking people up by the kind of demonstrations that they're doing. OFA does not believe in that type of activity to that extent. We can't condone it for certain reasons, but we do appreciate what they're doing.
I'd also like to touch on the debate over LLA's tactics. Some people have said they're too edgy, too radical, or too militant. Let's think back 40 years. 1962, 63, 64, right on through that decade. Tractors were on the roads of Ontario, not here and there, but all over every summer for several years. 40 years ago, farm families were not begging or asking for just and equitable returns for their labor and investment, but farm families demanded the Governments of the Day Act to build structures to provide justice in the marketplace, and the OFU played a key role in the successes that that decade enjoyed. So the notion that somehow taking tractors on the roads is counterproductive ignores our own history and ignores the reality that you cannot make positive change happen until you make everyone aware of the problem. We in the farm community make a lot of our contribution to the economy of Ontario. We're second to auto. We generate $8 to $9 billion worth of economic activity. We create 700,000 to 800,000 jobs. And if you took all that out, it'd leave a huge hole in this province. It'll touch on everybody.
Our provincial neighbors to the east and Quebec support their farmers. Our neighbors to the south of the U.S. support their farmers. And we need the support of our people and our government here in Ontario. We need the public servants and the building that's behind you to step forward and get their shoulders under the load with us. We need our government to understand and to help our fellow Ontarians understand the crucial importance of safe, abundant, nutritious food grown right here in Ontario.
The tractors and trucks came from all around, the farmers and workers and dwellers and all from rural Canada answering the call. We're all for one and one for all. Peaceful life is all that we want. Yeah, come walk in our shoes before you judge. Kind and hard working with so much to give. Bureaucratically strangled. How can we live bureaucratically strangled?
It's a heck of a sacrifice to be here today. But what you're doing is making a point that you are not being treated with the respect that you have earned over the generations.
We rolled on down the old 401. Come on, they said, let's go have some fun. We'll peacefully say that we've all had enough. The government's playing a little too rough. Reporters were there, as were the police, each taking our pictures. Now wasn't that neat? We'll be on the cover of paper and press. Police files are ready if they make arrests. A peaceful life is all that we want. Come walk in our shoes before you judge. Kind and hard-working with so much to give. Bureaucratically strangled. How can we live bureaucratically strangled?
I'm so glad to see so many of you here today, especially on such short notice. You know, many of my colleagues and I stand up in the House almost daily, fighting for the government to give agriculture and rural Canada the respect it deserves. It's a tough fight, let me tell you, because they seem to be focused on the urban areas only, and to heck with the rest of us. Rural Canada produces 40% of our exports in this country. 40%. If we lose rural Canada, we lose that business. And that's not good for Canada. We've seen the Liberal government in Ontario cut support to agriculture by 23% last week. That's not acceptable either. We have to fix that.
In my riding as well, Prince Edward Hastings, we experience the same as you. We have family farms, and not one or two or three or four or five, but the dozens and dozens that are going down every year, year after year. People that have given their lifetime and generations. Farms that should be passed on to the next generation, so our young people should have hope. And we have a government that doesn't even recognize the reality of that. They don't seem to understand the pain and the hurt that you're going through.
We've seen the budget that came down from this federal government show not one new penny for our farmers, and when all of them are facing one of the worst crises in over 50 years. Whether it's BSC, whether it's our grains and seeds, no matter what it is, these are tough times.
There isn't one person here who doesn't know how ineffective and useless and what a piece of rotten legislation the CASE program is. It doesn't work. Has anybody in here totally been enamored, and isn't it wonderful to you? No. So the government has finally decided they're going to take some action. They're going to study it. They're going to bring in some more high-priced consultants, and they're going to study the CASE program to tell you that it doesn't work for you. I'm disappointed as a rural Canadian that we have to appear to be playing second best to a government that doesn't understand the basic principle that food is an essential item. If we do not control our own food supply, and we drive our producers out of business, and we leave ourselves hostage only to the international sources, then what's going to happen? It works so much better if you can make a point by standing together. And when you're coming out of here on 2 days' notice, and I see that street just coming down, and I see tractors from end to end and wall to wall, that sends a very clear message. Now maybe the Liberals up there, their blinds are probably pulled. They don't want to see this reality. But the truth is, It's there. I can see the hurt, and I've been on your farms. I'm a rural person. And when I go there and I see the disappointment from people that should be very, very proud to earn a living, it really, really concerns me as a parliamentarian. So keep on making your points and understand that there are people that do listen to you. There are people, and we're speaking up more and more and more and more, and we will continue to do that for you. So don't back off one little bit. Don't back off. Get on the board here.
My sister Stacy and I took a trip to see my good friend Mike Wheeler. He and his family run a beef farm and a maple syrup operation.
Hi, my name is Michael Wheeler. I live on my family farm at Snow Road Station. Our family started making maple syrup here on this property in 1955 when my grandparents Earl and Verna Wheeler moved down here from Cobden, Ontario. And in 1975 my dad bought the farm, and to this date we've still been making syrup since then. Over the years we've expanded our operation, and now we're at around 14,400 taps. Last year they were trying to put a different taxation into effect for maple syrup producers, whereby right now they're being classified as agricultural, and they want to classify it as industrial. Their rationale was you're taking a product, which was sap, and converting it into another product, which was maple syrup. So that was sort of their reasoning behind it, which I think is pretty ridiculous, where most of the operations that would have been affected are, small little producers who, might just have a few taps, and the government wants to slap this big tax on it, which a lot of producers actually had slapped on them last year. And it actually prevented some producers from making maple syrup last year. But fortunately, there was, a pretty big outcry regarding this new taxation. So since then, they've had it reversed, and it's not going to be a problem for maple syrup producers now. It's not so much the amount of taxes that would be levied against maple syrup producers that would be the problem. It's being classified as industrial as well, because if you were to look at any maple syrup producers around, and this goes the same for family farms who have, dairy and beef cattle as well, they're family run, they're, the furthest thing from industrial that you can possibly get. You get a real intimate feel with these types of operations, where you have basically family members or people that are really close to the operation, and they have sort of their hearts and souls involved with the product they're making, or with the animals that they take care of. And besides making maple syrup on our farm, we also have close to 100 head of beef cattle, and we also have a logging operation, firewood and logs. And all these operations seem to complement one another quite well on our farm. And some of the stories that Laura tells me about how farmers are expropriated from their land, I can barely almost believe it, just because we haven't been affected by it yet, and it seems like such an outrage that stuff is allowed to continue. Even how you can't even cut a tree off your property. I mean, if that were ever put in place on our land, it would seem pretty ridiculous, and it would seriously affect our way of life here. How? Well, I guess it would affect our income, I guess. That's an understatement, I suppose. But I guess in all fairness, there are points where you have to have some level of regulation, but at this point there's things that are just being taken to the level of absurdity in what they're implementing right now. There needs to be a better dialogue between landowners and the government needs to realize, the type of people that private landowners are. They're responsible individuals who want to, take care of their own land, and, they have a certain responsibility towards upholding this land. I think there's a certain amount of misunderstanding between those who live in rural areas and those who live in more urbanized centers, where if you're to talk to somebody, you know, from a city, I don't really want to generalize or anything, but if I say, you know, I log during the summer, they look at me and almost disgust sometimes, and they're like, you cut trees down, but yet they don't actually have a connection to the land. They rarely ever see this type of area, and yet I'm living on it every day, and I'm concerned, even more concerned about it than they are. So what we're trying to do is sustain the land here, not destroy it. So, and the same goes for, you know, farming as well, where you might have some people who say, you know, keeping animals is cruel. Well, you know, we take care of our animals, we're concerned with their well-being. I think a lot of people just don't understand that. We are responsible, and we are stewards of the land, I should say, and we are taking care of what's there and making sure that there is a future. With any luck, I'll continue to be a part of our operation, and eventually I'd like to take over, just because I feel such a connection to the land here and to what we do, and it's just become a way of life, and I just can't imagine not having that again in the future. So that's my ultimate goal, is to be back here.
Larry Robinson, he's a chicken farmer. Just want to let us know what you have to deal with in the face of government intrusion these days.
This spring they made me get a license, a federal license to import birds from Quebec. 3 years ago they started making me pay a levy on every bird I brought in from Quebec. Now they're saying that if you bring in from another province you have to have an import license. I have to have licenses from the Chicken Farmers of Ontario Chicken Egg Hatching Commission, the Turkey Marketing Board, and I have to have a license from Natural Resources. And I have to fill out papers, and I have to submit to the marketing boards weekly all the purchases and all the sales with every detail of the source, the number, the sex, the age, the breed, the price, and so on, and where they're going, and the address, lot, concession, township. If I'm a day late, they're phoning me and wanting to know why my reports are not in, and if there's a discrepancy of 3 birds on the report in what was purchased and what was sold, they're phoning to find out what happened.
So Larry, we hear a lot about the avian bird flu epidemic in BC. How does that relate to your problem?
They're using that as an excuse to eliminate the fanciers and the backyarders, the small farm flocks, because they're saying that we don't meet the health regulation standards, we don't have proper facilities, and we're endangering the marketing board quota holder farmers, because if disease gets in there and if we're spreading it to them, it endangers their business. But in fact, if you look at the States and in Canada, all the outbreaks have been in the big corporate firms where they have the top security systems and the top hygiene setup, and yet because those birds are in a literally germ-free environment, they have no immunity, and if something gets in there, it just spreads like wildfire. And one of the vets they interviewed after the avian influenza outbreak out west said they've got to rethink. They can't continue to farm the way they're farming. Big corporate farms, especially when they're side by side and they have so many birds, it's just asking for trouble.
sure many of you have heard that the Ministry of Environment figures sawdust is a danger to us. And we have to close up sawmills because of sawdust and bark piles. Well, in Lanark, we've told them we're not going to let them close down anymore. In the last year, they've closed down 8 small family sawmills, thrown about 100 people out of work, and ruined the lives of 8 families. And we've said we're not going to let them close down any more mills in Lanark and Renfrew. And the MOE is going to get the message clearly.
You can hear this whole log drivers call.
We're here now with Earl Sarr, a sawmill operator in the Pembroke area. This is his sawmill operation that hasn't been operating for 2 years now.
Yeah, it's almost
And
2 years.
we were wondering if you could tell us a little bit about why you're standing here with a sawmill operation that isn't running.
A couple of years ago, maybe in June or so, I got a letter from MOE, Ministry of Environment, saying that they would like to come in, and I said fine, and there was 3 big black vans come in, and they had costumes that you put on up at, I think from the atomic energy plant maybe, you know, and they got out, that scared me. They kept me in the office with Mr. Poley, and we talked about everything. Said, well, we're done, we inspected your place, and I said, how was it? And they said, you'll get a report. So I guess I got reports ever since then. They instructed me to hire a consultant to tell me what to do. And I, being 72 years old, I thought, jeepers now. I knew a young consultant in Ottawa, he was only about in his 20s. I said, I think I know just as much as him, because I have another company with my sons, and we build sawmills, or we put them together or get them started. And we went to Moscow, Russia, and we went to Estonia twice, and we were into Guyana, South America. I built a sawmill there. And the last one, I guess we were over in Haiti, and we got all that done. So I think I knew just as much as that young guy there in Ottawa who wanted $2,500 from me just to say hello. And I said, well, I'm living in Pembroke, so I better say, I only have $25 for gas, so I better go home with that. But he came up anyway, it was good, and he said what we do, and he done this for nothing, you know. He said what we do is put a well there and one here, and that was a beaver pond behind there. And he said we'd put another well down where the water goes out, and we could test the water there. Just go to Canadian Tire and get yourself some 1.5-inch plastic pipe, drill some holes in it, plug the bottom, and sharpen it, and have it driven down there. Bring up a thimble full of water and send the sample in, and do that every 2-3 times a year if you want. So I did that. But then one thing led to another, and they made an estimate that there was 54,000 cubic meters or something of this stuff here. Well, this I got out of here in the past 2 years now, out of that area. I scraped right down to the clay, and that's what we call waste now. I guess that's what the environment would call waste, but I'm calling it compost. And since then, the beavers, I had them trapped out of here. I guess that's against the law too. But seemingly that's what the MOE wanted. I don't know, they were calling that all debris. And the beavers were very upset about that, because I think they built a better dam than I could build out of debris. So anyway, that's about it. I've been in court 8 times now, and still no answer.
What do they say in court?
Remanded till whenever. I don't know what's happening there, but I think after 2 years they should have come to some agreement. They were here last Thursday, MOE, and asked if they could bring 3 people, and I had 3 people, and I said, what do you want done? Like, can I use some of that to level this road out here? Yes, it's your own road. You're not going on public property. And I said, well, how deep can I go? Because that's a slight hole there for these transports to come in so that I can load them on that loading ramp. And he didn't know how deep I could go or how shallow. So I don't think they have any laws.
Shutting down your sawmill was a result of their investigation and their process in court.
There was a lot of publicity about that in the papers, I guess, and I don't know if it was good or bad, but my customer said, gee, I can't bring you any more logs because MOE says that if you hit a log or a tree with the axe and put a notch in it or make a mark on it, then it is going to be a waste product. So we're afraid that they might seize our logs, or they might even seize our lumber that we have here in your yard. So my customers shut me down, really, but not their fault though.
Did you have very many employees?
Yeah, we had 12 here.
So does anyone want to take this over? Anyone in your family?
Well, we have to get this, yeah, I've got an older son, Richard, and his son, my grandson, Adam, he went back to university again. And Richard, he went back to school and got his degree in teaching English. So I don't know, we've been in business here since 1946. My father and I started when the big hydro line went through the woods there. It went right through all these pine forests right up to the Swishaw, and that's when we had to build a sawmill, or the customers or the people that had all their logs cut, the logs would have decayed, you know, and they wouldn't have got anything out of it. But 1946, that's you know, 50, 60 years that we were in business, and never would we ever think of making the environment a bad thing, because we started off in agriculture, and you don't put stuff in your fields that doesn't make your crops grow, you know. In fact, there was never any commercial fertilizer or any spray on this farm ever. And the hydro came in and started spraying one day, and I had a heck of a time shutting them down. And they killed my lilac trees and strawberry plants and the garden of my cousin that lives right beside the hydro line. So that was that. I said, no spraying on our property ever. He said, what are we going to do with the bushes and the shrubs that come up in the right-of-way? I said, I'm going to put some of this stuff on it. We'll put a foot of that on there. And I went to the Ministry of Environment at that time. That's got to be 10 years ago. And I said, can I spread sawdust, bark, and mulch on that hydro line to keep the weeds from growing, the weed trees? And he said, yeah. I said, can I put it on a big pile and store it? He said, if you store it on a pile, you have 1 year. Then you can put it out on that right-of-way. And that's what we did. I think that's what they should be looking at, instead of hiring bulldozers and a whole bunch of guys with little whippersnippers and little chainsaws trying to cut little trees. Just cover it all with this stuff here. A1, good, dandy. I see it down in Queen's Park. I see it in Ottawa.
Covering flower beds?
Yeah.
And they claim that your pile of sawdust
debris,
bark is environmental waste.
Yeah, well, an environmental hazard.
Environmental hazard.
Now, the only hazard I can see in that is the odd stone there, because when they put that through a grinder to grind those pieces of wood, the stones would be bad.
Have they closed any other sawmills down in this area?
Not really shut down, but Gulick is in the same problem with me. He's up in the lower end of the county, and I was the upper end here, and I guess they thought that if we get one from each end of the county, we would squeal on all the other sawmillers, but we didn't. We asked them all to come to a small sawmillers association, and they did, and we never gave any names out to MOE. But now they found a way to find them out. They go into the M&R office and get their mill license number, so their address is right on there. So I see today they did a water test at Poppy's mill up here in Alice. They've have started looking at all the other ones too, the ones they know of.
Do you wonder why they're doing this?
No, I can't understand. I think there's a whole bunch of other things they could be doing with that manpower, because they're going to spend the money anyway.
Earl spent the day driving us around to sawmills. Many of them were hidden.
He tries to hide it in here too.
These guys are hiding because
they're afraid. Yeah. Why should you be afraid
exactly.
of working? I'd be afraid not to work. I'd try and hide, you know, but it's more trouble trying to hide from working, you know, and taking your check from the government than it is to go and work. Gee, you know, terrible. The country is done, I think. Whatever your father told you is right, that's wrong now. At last you just throw up your hands and say, what the hell am I doing this at 72 years old? The M&R sent me a sawmill permit to operate a forest resource processing facility, license number 5633, every year. This is 2003's. And I've got 2004's up at the mill. You know, why would the government give me that? But that's a different government. That's the M&R. And it's MOE that's driving around, trying to harass us. You know, it teases you, it ticks you off.
This is the Ministry of Environment that's told him that he has material that maybe could cause a human health impact, but they haven't told him what.
The logs come in like these ones here on the ground, and the table is full up there, the skidway. Then they go through that machine and they're debarked. It takes all the dirt and the outer layer of the bark off of it, and this is the waste that comes off of it. But I don't like to call it waste because you get $6 a ton for that at Temple. So we load up a transport and maybe have 40 tons on it, and it'll actually pay for the trip and the fuel and the truck driver, and you end up with a little money left over. Then the chips that they also buy, but a lot more than $6 a ton. It's about $60 a ton for good chips. And the sawdust, and they grind that all up, make it into a slurry, and then they make the real good nice, it looks like plywood that comes out, and they actually make cupboard doors out of it and design it and everything. You have no waste in a sawmill, because I think if you had waste and tried to just put that away somewhere, you wouldn't be in business, because you need that extra income to pay the men, and to pay the fuel, and to pay the hydro and the energy. We've been taking a load of this a week, every week, and sometimes two, to our waste management site, because it's all wet on the floor there where the people work, and the ladies are saying, gee, my feet are always wet, because they're sorting cans and bottles and plastic, and it all goes into a right bin. So all this sawdust, bark, and chips, that goes out into a, I guess they call it a composter, and the heat is put into that, and it's ready for compost in less than a month. And they haven't got any left. Everybody come out and bought it for $15 a cubic meter.
There's a valley I know where the tall timbers grow, where the Ottawa River flows swiftly along.
He's been 62 years working on the saw, and he's always been on the right side of the law. But MOE officials stopped him cold, and his sawmill working days were put on hold. The black fans that arrived that day with flair held men in hazard suits who didn't care about the little gang they're working on the saw, who now were on the wrong side of the law. He tried to say it wasn't really waste of the sawdust, bark, and chips that they discovered on his place. He told them if they took a look around, they would find it on the flower beds in town. But they drove away with samples in their hands of the evidence they took from on his land, with promises to send him a report, and if he followed it, he wouldn't go to court. So off to court all 7 times, well 7 times he went, till the money for the lawyers that he hired was all spent. And again he tells his story, and his story is all true, and the judge says, I'll be getting back to you. The rumor is they never found the waste, and there wasn't any toxic stuff discovered on his place. But if you take a stroll on government ground, some hazardous material will be found. So listen up while I tell you what to do, before the same same thing happens, yes it happens next to you. Join your rural friends, join and take a stand, and get a sign that says back off our land. Join your rural friends, join and take a stand, and get a sign that says back off our land.
My dad owns a sawmill, and the Ministry of Environment came in to, I guess, attempt to try and shut him down. I think at that point the sawmill was like very environmentally friendly. There was almost no waste coming out of it. Everything was recycled and reused. They walked past the diesel tanks and whatnot, which could have been of environmental hazard, and they just went straight to his sawdust piles, stating that it was environmentally unfriendly or unsafe or whatever. It was pretty upsetting anyway, just thinking that all that work had went down the drain after 27 years of his hard work. I thought right then that probably that would be the end of the whole family business. With the help of the landowners associations, they've never been back, and this is 2 years now since that's happened, and so far so good.
After joining the LLA and also the Wood Producers of Ontario, I realized that I'm not alone. There are 40-some sawmills with the same toxic substance as me in Renfrew and Lanark alone. When I joined, I was a very troubled person. I had just had a visit from the Minister of the Environment and the bureaucrats, and realized that they could put me out of business, and everything I had worked for the last 28 years could be in jeopardy. I also discovered that farmers and abattoirs, campgrounds, and other small businesses were hurting in the same way as I was, all from the hands of bureaucrats or of our elected dictatorship. They've gotten freedom and safety reversed. Freedom must always come before safety, or our veterans fought for nothing. I've never voted for a politician in my life and asked him or her to protect me from myself. This is a job that they've taken on by themselves and to enforce. The fight we're involved in now is a lot more than just sawdust, nutrient management, and chlorinated water. It's about having the freedom to make a living off your property, having the freedom to enjoy your property and the fruits of your labor, and not have to worry about our government arriving and putting you out of business. It's not every day that you can join an organization that is dedicated to a cause and has leaders that have the foresight to realize we must stick together as a large amalgamated group. All for one and one for all. People, we want true justice and freedom and a whole lot less government control. Long live the Lanark landowners and other likewise groups. Thank you.
The sign over there, it reads Canada's property rights. Last known whereabouts, Communist China. Believe it or not, China brought in property rights.
Property rights. What does that mean? Just to...
Well, what does it mean to you when you have ownership?
It's mine, nobody can take it.
That's right. It's mine, nobody can take it.
That's right.
And as long as you don't harm somebody else with what you own, you can do whatever the hell you want.
Okay. You can cut down a tree on your own property?
You can cut down a tree. If you cut down a tree and it falls on your neighbor's car, then you have to pay for the damage. Okay?
Okay.
But you can cut down the tree and then you can sell the tree, you can burn the tree.
And now you can't do that?
No, you have to get permission to do it.
I've been out talking to people, and yes, you certainly do deserve property rights, and I firmly support property rights for you.
I have every sympathy with the farmers. Personally, I'm an engineer, but the thing that really ticks me off is that I'm also just a landowner in West Carleton. And I should be able to enjoy the facilities of having purchased that land and the values and rights that I got by purchasing it with my hard-earned cash. And I spent goodness knows how many hours, days, months trying to fight off city officials who want to take those rights away.
You know, with the Lanark landowners and every other landowners association, our principle is property rights. We don't want government taking our property. We won't allow them to take our property. We want them to respect our property. And then likewise, we have to respect other people's property.
I had a problem with the Ministry of Natural Resources and the Conservation Authority and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and I decided to call Randy, and 5 months ago I had the honor to sit down at the table with Jacqueline Fennell and Gil Sear and Dwayne McKinley and Doug Aldridge, and the five of us started the Leeds and Grenville Landowners Association. So I want to tell you people today and all the media here today so they all hear what our focus is, and that's to enshrine property rights in the Constitution.
Well,
Well, property rights affect everybody and all over Ontario. We've been watching the land art group for a while now, and we decided that it's something we need to take issue with in Leeds and Grenville counties as well. The main issues for the Leeds and Grenville counties are going to be fighting a fortification bylaw that they're trying to pass right now in Augusta Township, which will essentially give officer of the court the right to come on your property at any time without you arguing, without telling you to leave. As well, we want to fight putting meters on wells. That's a really strong issue in Leeds and Grenville, and obviously we feel that no one's going to put a meter on our well.
There are a lot of things that we do need to focus on, individual policies, whether it's Regulation 17003, whether it's the Nutrient Management Act, whether it's the foolish way in which the government is treating sawmills, whether it's the firearms law, and one can go on the Species at Risk Act. But there is one focal point that's very, very, very clear, and that is property rights. And it's not that government shouldn't do what government has to do to protect our environment, to protect our water quality, to make sure that all those other public policy goals are achieved. That's not what the goal is here. It's if you're going to do something, if you're going to impose a cost in order to benefit society at large, just make sure that society at large pays that cost through compensation to the people who are having to change their pattern of behavior.
The attack is also fundamentally about governments that have chosen to trample property rights of farmers and thereby jeopardize the entire rural way of life in our country. Regulations for rural Ontario should reflect rural Ontario.
I understand the difficulties you're facing with all these regulations, and I guess one word comes to mind all the time, and it's bureaucracy. We live in a time of large bureaucracies. Think of the private companies. Think of dealing with the telephone company, the cable company, the banks. Well, governments are the same. The municipal government, the provincial government, the federal government have large bureaucracies that are implementing hordes and hordes of regulations. Nobody ever thinks of the consequences of all these regulations. Now, at the federal level, one of the things that we can do is bring in property rights. And the ideal is to have property rights in the Constitution. But that is a very difficult move because you have to get the federal government and at least 7 provinces to agree. But at the very least, at the federal level, you could get the Parliament to pass a federal law on property rights, which in effect would say that henceforth, all laws passed that affect person's property will be subject to compensation, and that's the effect of property rights. If you have property rights, then you get compensated for governments passing laws that interfere with your use of your land. And I believe that it's within our fundamental policies of our party to fight for property rights. And when Parliament opens this fall, I expect, as from our side, a private member's bill to go forward on property rights, and we'll see where it goes in minority government. Anyway, I wish the LLA good luck in what they're doing. And I know that most of their problems are at the provincial level. And they've got all these various departments in the provincial government having all their bureaucrats out chasing the farmers and the landowners. And I hope that they can get at the provincial government to look at it again in a holistic way. Maybe the Department of Rural Affairs should start looking after rural affairs and start dealing with it in the whole manner. Our federal party is with you, and we're going to see what we can do about property rights. Thank you very much.
His name is Bob Fowler, and he got caught a-fouling one day.
Thanks, Randy. You're looking at a criminal, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a killer of geese. We're very often labeled by government, and it's always a label that conceals what we really are, which are landowners. You're going to find that you're called stakeholders. There's an awful lot of other stakeholders. These people are bureaucrats, they're special interest groups, and they're people who are always out in force at any public meeting. Canada doesn't have in its constitution the right to own and enjoy property. A lot of people think that we do have it. We don't, and it's not in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms either. That's pretty strange, isn't it? For a country that's awash
in every conceivable right for everything, for everybody, none of its citizens have the constitutional right to own land. The very right that stands at the cornerstone of Western civilization, the one that Russia wrote into its constitution in the 1980s, and even Communist China officially recognized several months ago. Let's talk about those labels. If you're not stakeholders, we're called in all of the government documents stewards. If you look up a definition in the dictionary of a steward, it is a person who administers the property of others. The government tells us that others are really generations yet unborn. You folks are expected then to be an unpaid janitor of your own property while we're waiting for a new crop of stewards. The British North America Act authorizes every province to legislate its own property rights. Opera has several years ago approached the then current government and asked them to put property rights in provincial legislation. They told us that it was too complex. And I suggest to you, ladies and gentlemen, that if you look at the Nutrient Management Act, they don't know what complex is.
You know, we're seeing a lot of regulations coming through. Most of them have this environmental camouflage that they poke over them first before they put them out. That Safe Drinking Water Act, the Nutrient Management Act, Species at Risk Act, and I can go on and on about the number of acts that these guys have. And up our way, we even have the Department of Fisheries and Oceans saying you can't clean out your ditches anymore because there may be a minnow in it. And Department of Fisheries and Oceans, well, they think minnows are more important than you guys out here. Think more, same with people in Lanark. Those little minnows have to be protected at any cost. Doesn't matter how many farmers we put out of business to protect those minnows.
Another MNR program involves the loggerhead shrike. It's a small bird with an appetite for large insects and small rodents. The MNR says it's endangered. Thus, an MNR program to import shrike breeding pairs into southwestern Ontario. This bird impales its dead prey on such pointed storage sites as thorn trees for later feasting. According to an MNR promotional booklet, each breeding pair requires 10 acres of land. The long-term effect of saving hundreds of thorn trees for supposedly endangered loggerhead shrikes will be of great interest to farmers, particularly those with a healthy crop of thorn trees. By the way, Ontario Bird, an MNR associate agency, advises that anyone approaching a loggerhead shrike nest without a permit is liable to prosecution and, upon conviction, to a fine of up to $50,000 plus 1 year imprisonment. That's democracy, folks.
They want to protect this land. They sell. That's what they tell us. They want to protect this land. We've got a bunch of downtown urban bureaucrats who have created Toronto, created the small capital of Canada, and they want to tell us how to take care of our land. Well, we know what is going to happen. Instead of farms out here and business people, there's going to be Toronto dump sites and urban dump sites and toxic landfills. We have a study in Lanark. The Ministry of Environment paid $1.2 million or $1.4 million to do a 2-year study. And they found there's about 400 sites that are a threat to our water supply up there, or may be a threat in the future. And out of those 400 sites, 385 of them are owned by the government.
The Clean Water Act and the Greenbelt legislation both affect us. We have a bed and breakfast, and we also have property which we use for cross-country skiing and other recreational uses, and that's going to introduce about 325 restrictions on use of that land, and we believe that's our land and back off government. So we would really like to see property rights enshrined in the Constitution, and that would be a real important thing for all rural residents in Ontario.
We've given Dalton McGilty till March 9th to solve these problems, because on March 9th, if they're not, he plans on implementing that Greenbelt legislation. and we're planning to be at the legislature, and we will be there.
And this Greenbelt legislation is going from Algonquin Park to the Adirondacks. So it's covering a wide swath of Ontario, and there's no compensation to the people's properties that it's going to encompass. And that is part of the problem. They're just making these rules, and it's the most Toronto government that I have seen in my lifetime. All these notions and ideas are coming out of bureaucrats in Toronto that don't seem to understand rural Ontario.
In the latest game of regulatory roulette, the Ontario government sterilized almost 2 million acres of land, much of it privately owned. It has, of course, a warm and fuzzy name, the Golden Horseshoe Greenbelt, and all the usual support from lobby groups that will benefit from its early adoption. But it doesn't have scientifically proven justification, it doesn't have an appeal process, and it damn well doesn't have any compensation for disenfranchised landowners.
The boundaries make absolutely no sense. Yet, the government, through Mr. Garretson, has indicated again and again that science was used. The boundaries have political science. The boundaries have land ownership science. All you have to do is look at the Globe and Mail yesterday and look at TVO last night, and it will tell you what Mr. Garretson did in response to a certain person about keeping him out of the Greenbelt. Very interesting, in Halton, there is gerrymandered boundaries, and everybody knows what gerrymandered means. One of the excluded boundaries belongs directly or indirectly to Mattamy Homes. The president of Mattamy Homes was on the Greenbelt Task Group. Hello. Another company, Metro's Development, directly or indirectly, got some Greenbelt gerrymandered out. The general manager of Metros was on the Greenbelt Task Group.
Sponsorship scandal again.
I cannot afford $10,000 to sit and break bread with Mr. Sorbera and Mr. McFlinty. That's why I'm in the Greenbelt, not out of the Greenbelt. I want the government to start over again, consult the people, and ensure that there is a level playing field. The government is deaf and dumb. We know they're dumb, but now we know they're deaf. And we gotta keep telling them what we want. So if we don't get anything by next week, we need to undertake another action.
What we're looking at is a constitutional challenge to get democratic rights back that we've lost and to get property rights that we never had in the first place. I urge your help. We're in the same boat as Randy, we're in the same boat as all of us feel together. Somebody gets it in tobacco, somebody gets it in seed, somebody gets it in cattle, somebody gets it, or all of us get it in property rights that we haven't got. And we are being run by McGuinty and his group, by these liberals and their group. They're pissing away money, but they're making us serve. Thank you.
We all live in the rural area and we enjoy the natural environment and we have a very direct interest in preserving it. So why am I opposed to wetlands? Well, basically three issues. It's been a very underhand and arbitrary process to designate our properties. The Ministry of Natural Resources has a very bizarre definition of wetlands, and it's been a gross violation of our property rights. If we can talk about the process for a moment, the city started a study in 2003, we think. In September 2004, the environmentalists flew over our property at 2,000 feet and decided which plants were wetland plants and which were not. And in February 2005, our properties were designated wetlands. At this point, we knew nothing about it. It wasn't until April that the city bothered to inform us that we've been designated, and they held an information meeting to tell us all about it. And this was specifically an information meeting. Our input was not required. They were simply telling us what they were doing to us. If we talk about the definition of wetlands, the Ministry has a manual called the Ontario Wetlands Evaluation System Manual, which they use to provide guidance for evaluators. It's designed for bureaucratic simplicity, not for reality. Your property is designated as wetlands based purely on the plants that grow there. Susan Murphy from the city's Environmental Planning Department confirmed that your property doesn't need to be wet to be a wetland. This is bureaucracy gone crazy.
Just because you don't have aquatic plants or plants that you consider to be wetlands doesn't mean it's not wetland. Those trees that are wetland trees would indicate that at some point that land has been flooded.
They don't care if your property is wet. They don't care why it's wet. For instance, city drainage policies. They don't care what was there on your property last year or what will be there next year. It's purely what's growing there right now.
The evaluation process looks at it, what is it today, based on vegetation. It doesn't look at what was it 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago, what will it be 10 years from now or 20 years from now, because you can't do that. So you look at it at a point in time and assess it based on the plants that are there.
And to help the evaluators, they have a list of wetland plants in their manual and a list of upland plants. There are 4 pages of wetland plants and only half a page of upland plants. So you can see which way the evaluation is going to go. So the process goes something like this. The city fails to provide drainage. The water causes spring flooding on our properties. Spring flooding causes wetland plants to grow. The city sees the wetland plants and the city designates our properties. To take another quick example, in the late 80s tree planting was in vogue and everybody was saying we need more trees. So the Ministry of Natural Resources had a managed forest program. And they would come and they would tell you what trees you should be growing on your property and they would help you to plant them. Guess what? Some of the recommendations were that we plant tamaracks. And guess what? Tamaracks are an indicator species for wetland. So the province recommends tamaracks. The owner takes their recommendation and plants tamaracks. City sees tamaracks. City designates property.
So you stripped the landowners of all rights to the property. We have no options anymore. It's basically going to be worthless land, breeding mosquitoes or whatever. And then you stand there and tell us that that's it, too bad. Wash your hands, so long. Is that it?
So the question is, does the city offer compensation? And the answer is no.
I just want to say that nobody is saying that what you're saying about a wetland isn't right. What I think people are objecting to is the fact that you just sort of float in and take away our land or designate our land, which is our land, our property. Nobody's objecting to wetlands, and if it's on our property and want it, pay us for it or buy it from us, but don't just float in here and say we're taking it, because that's stealing.
So
is it not?
So the question is, what right do they have?
That's the question.
It's the provincial policy statement under the Planning Act of Ontario, and they're very clear about protecting what they have defined as provincially significant wetlands.
Basically, it's reducing our property values. The estimates we have from real estate people are that it's from $2,500 an acre to about $200 an acre afterwards. And if you live on a small property, you've probably been reduced a great deal more than that. While the city's doing this, it's talking about building on genuine wetlands, for instance in the Carl floodplain.
Councillor Shadavanga, who has history with that, is going to answer that question.
I think actually maybe Sean can help out with Timbermere, but I know Timbermere dates back to the early 80s, and I suspect if Timbermere though was being dealt with now, that wouldn't be permissible. So that predates me.
How about the low by
Yeah, no, I'm gonna, sir. Yeah. Do you know what? If I can actually answer it, I'll be delighted to. Okay. The other one with regards to the independent grocer, and more in particular, actually, the Amber Lakes development, which is a housing development that goes down there. There was a band right along Main Street, the first core along Main Street, back in the 70s, when the first official plans that Goulburn did, they designated that commercial. Now again, Had that been during the time that, for example, when Stephen and I was on council, that would have been, because that's floodplain. That was designated floodplain, but that right was given in the 70s, and that could not be taken away.
So be wary of the bureaucrats driving in your lane. These environmental words, but they're playing a word game. If they cared about the wetlands, we'd see more of them around, instead of shopping malls and houses on the outskirts of town. So take your little projects and go back to the drawing board, and remember this is our land and not yours to hoard. If you want to see wetlands on your pictures from the sky, you'll treat us with respect and we won't scrape them dry. Silver maple, black ash, and eastern white pine are some of the trees grown on this land of mine. But they're all wetland species, the list is 4 pages long. We'll fight these designations 'cause their methods are wrong.
We've been actually fighting this since 1999 when the area was first amalgamated. As I said, we were from Bobcaygeon, Fountain Falls. It's now the city of Kawartha Lakes. So we have the biggest city probably in Canada by area. But it's 72,000 people, but more cows than people. But we're still a city. The provincial Tories amalgamated us. We fought before that. They sent in a commissioner. They just forced the amalgamation. We fought it. We asked for a referendum to get out of it. Before he was elected, Dalton McGuinty promised us a binding referendum on de-amalgamation. So we actually, Chris Hodgson finally came. He was the Minister of Municipal Affairs then, came to our council and announced that he would give us a referendum. So we've got the referendum. We fought it. We had a yes side and a no side. And the yes side won the referendum. We actually voted to de-amalgamate. And that was 3 years ago. Dalton McGuinty has now reneged on his promise, and he actually sent the Minister of Municipal Affairs, who is John Gerritsen, to our council to say no, they weren't going to recognize the amalgamation.
In Victoria County, they had a referendum. They wanted to de-amalgamate. McGuinty, when he was in opposition, said, "We will respect referendums." He got into power.
He lied!
And he lied.
The casket is painted a brilliant liberal red, and it has signs on it that say "Democracy McGuinty Style," and "Here lies McGuinty." Forced amalgamations are an assault on rural Ontario, and it has to stop. And where there is a local demand to restore democratic local governments, it has to happen. And where, in our case, there has been an actual democratic provincial referendum, the Ontario government has to actually count the ballots and abide by the outcome of the vote. The Premier has to stop lying and start keeping his promises.
This is City of Ottawa. If you look out, you can see one street light. That's because my mom works for Ontario Hydro and she got us a street light. And it's sitting on a pole out in the barnyard. Our service would be garbage pickup and snow removal. They don't maintain the roads, and it's not hard to tell when you drive down them. We get no buses. They don't cut the ditch, which is something they should do in high deer car collision corridors. We're not City of Ottawa here, and we got to get out of it.
The amalgamation was the worst thing that ever happened to us.
Why do you say that?
Well, because all of a sudden a lot of rules and regulations for the city are being imposed on the rural areas. Burning, shooting, regulations over eggs and sawdust and maple trees and everything. It's crazy. We're trying to make a living here.
What's wrong with Ottawa for rural people is pretty obvious. It's been pretty well defined here today. It's been pretty well defined for a long time. We've had only 4.5 years of the new city. A lot of us felt it was a mistake and poorly designed in the beginning. I think time has proven that is correct. You can't mix urban and rural. It has failed. We're over-regulated. The official plan views us as owners of green space. Increasingly, the official plan is going to restrict how and where we can use our land, such as the people in Stittsville with their wetlands. The city is spending money hand over fist. They spend $100 million more every year than they take in. The reserves currently are $37 million. When the city started 4.5 years ago, it was $400 million. That was reserves from the rural townships and responsible communities like Nepean and Canada and several other communities that were sucked into the black hole of Ottawa. And we get more regulations and more restrictions and less freedom and less services.
Out of 17,000 city employees, there isn't one city employee or even a consultant that the city has hired that specializes in agricultural or rural affairs. The city chose in budget cuts to cut only one committee, and that was the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Advisory Committee. We started the Rural Council to offer ourselves as a resource for the city to say there are some problems. Unfortunately, the city has not seen fit to come to us in the forming of bylaws or any other policy decisions or planning decisions that have come down the pike.
And if we continue to leave decision-making in a handful of very sincere and well-meaning politicians and a handful of some very learned planners in the building behind me and some other municipal buildings around the city, there is nowhere to go but down. The greatest strength when it comes to rural issues, the greatest strength when it comes to decision-making lies outside of the hub of Ottawa. It lies with the experience and the knowledge of the families that have lived for many, many generations in their hamlets, in their villages, in their communities, that are ready to contribute, that are ready to come forward with the solutions. So, what's the solution? We have to be able to govern ourselves. They're not willing to let us do that. That just means we have to work a little harder to achieve that end. I do believe that Carleton County, as we used to have some 30 years ago, even before the regional municipality, would be a perfect model of how to have good government, how to provide what we need and deserve, and what we need to go out and get. To me, I think this sounds pretty wonderful. This is the percentage of respondents supporting the recreation of independent rural municipalities. 90%. 90%.
On the way out here tonight, I'm just waiting for bylaw. I saw some cats not on a leash. You've been treated with utter contempt and disrespect by this mayor and this council, and quite frankly, it's embarrassing. You have had your representation go from 5 wards to 3 wards. You now have 3 councillors out of 23. Before you had 5 out of 21. So that's a nice way to start the Rural Summit. They've just reduced you to 3 councillors. After 1 year of myself being mayor, if you're not happy, guess what? I will promise. And when I say I promise, I will keep my promise. I will work and we will conduct a binding referendum for the 4 former townships. There will be a binding plebiscite referendum to see if you would like to form Carleton County or stay with Ottawa, because I believe it should be decided by the people, not the politicians.
I'm a resident of Canada, and I didn't like the idea of amalgamating Canada with the city of Ottawa. Nobody ever asked me, and in fact, if I recall, it was the Harris Conservatives that did that. And you're going to have to convince a lot of politicians at the provincial level, both conservatives and liberals, to support this cause.
Yeah, you got to remember, just in this ward, if I remember correctly, we send about $2 million a year in social services payments as part of our taxes, more than we get back. Okay, so if you were on your own, that's $2 million you'd be spending in your community.
This story does not end here. Rural Ontario is still struggling to survive. Businesses try to stay afloat despite new and costly regulations. Farmers continue to face large financial losses, and each new season brings continued uncertainty. However, there is some hope. Rallies and demonstrations throughout Ontario have brought considerable media attention to the agricultural problems. Politicians are starting to listen and acknowledge that the present system is failing the farmers. More and more rural people are standing up and saying no to bad government decisions. They want and need a common sense approach to problems. Changes have to be made at all levels of government to correct many of the laws that have hurt rather than helped the rural economy. Decisions made without full understanding of their consequences have contributed to the decline in rural prosperity and must be corrected. On February 25, 2006, the landowner groups across Ontario met in Belleville to form an umbrella organization, the Ontario Landowners Association. A vote was taken and Randy Hillier was declared the president of the OLA. The hope is that this organization can draw like-minded people together across the province to work with politicians in order to address the growing disconnect between urban policies and rural realities.